What's up, everybody? Another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. Today we got an awesome guest, somebody I'm a huge fan of, James Evan Pilato. He has the website MediaMonarchy.com. There's a bunch of different things that website offers, so we'll have James give a better description. It's alternative news, but also a bunch of other stuff. He also does a show that weekly with James Corbett, who's been on the show, New World Next Week. It's basically they just pick a couple of headlines and they do a little show where they just basically talk about the headlines. They research them, give you a bunch of good references to some of their opinions on the stuff and stuff like that. So just a really cool show. You can find that on Media Monarchy, the website, and James Corbett usually posts it up too, so you can check that out. And so I just want to thank James for being with us today.
Thanks so much, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. Hey, so real quick, let's get into your Media Monarchy, because you offer a bunch of different things on that website. Even though, like, I usually relate it with New World Next Week, you have a bunch of other tabs and a bunch of other things on there, like the navigating Netflix and all that stuff. So what if I have somebody who might not be familiar with your work listening, and they want to go to your website and they see all those tabs, how could you put it simply to, like, what it offers and what each kind of tab is and whatnot?
Well, that's you know, I almost laugh at that. How could I make it more simple? Because I wonder sometimes if I overcomplicate things. But honestly, it just started with Media Monarchy as the beginning, as the banner. And early on, when I started to do it in the mid 2000s, it was mostly centered on 9/11 truth and war in Iraq and Bush and all that kind of stuff going on then. But as the years started to go by, and as we all kind of realized, being in 9/11 truth or alternative media or whatever you want to call it, I think everybody reached the conclusion at different times, well, this can't just be all about 9/11. And people started to look into money, and people started to look into the way old history. And I started to look at, the food and health. So as my interests grew, I just basically sort of created new channels under or shows, so to speak, under the Media Monarchy banner, so that if there's something going on in food and health, I can post it, to Food World Order. And I've always loved, and James Corbett and I we were joking about this the other night. He was like, do you just sit around and think up funny things? It's like, I kind of do. I've always been into music and design and media. So I'm constantly thinking of sort of song lyrics, or that'd be a great band name, or that'd be a good, word to use. I was doing my Media Monarchy show and coined the phrase on the air, Food World Order. And immediately I was like, oh, that's good. I went home and registered the website that night. And then a little bit later, I started one dedicated to space and technology, and call that Cyberspace War. There's one that focuses on just sort of religion and society and the occult and sort of bizarre conspiracies, kind of news of the weird, and that one's called Holy Hexes. So there are all of these different sort of shows under the main Media Monarchy banner. So if you go to MediaMonarchy.com, you go, I want to hear new music. I do a weekly new music podcast called Pump Up the Volume, which is, of course, the hat tip to the Christian Slater film, which to me was a huge influence about, pirate radio back in the day.
Yeah. That's cool. I mean, that at least the thing is, like, I do music or whatever, and it's the same thing. Like, anytime you think of, like, a cool name, you randomly will come up with, like, a cool title, like, oh, this would be a cool band name, or this would be a cool album name, but you have nowhere to use it. So the cool thing about your website is that you can just add a tab and kind of use it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, in a way. And I think, with the real estate of the web, I mean, that's why companies, all the internet companies and all the things that we use, half the time have made up words as the names, because all of that real estate has all been taken up. It's like, oh, everybody's registered every single name. So when you kind of think of something that is original, in a way, you sort of have to run with it. And now using Twitter as much as I do and have for the past few years, having that hashtag Food World Order, it's like, yeah, I made that up. So when I use that, I can follow all the stories that I'm posting as hashtag Food World Order. And then if other people want to use that, it's like, boom, you're automatically down. And now we're sharing information. So in a way, that's why lots of band names have funny misspellings, because all those other band names were already taken, and you need something that will actually show up if someone searches it on the internet.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like, every good band name has been taken. Like, I listen to some older stuff, I listen to new stuff, but I try to stay up to date with modern music. And for a while, like the metalcore scene was just like the most silliest names, like Drop Dead Gorgeous, or even one of the bands I really like, Devil Wears Prada. You know, all these band names. I'm just like, dude, we are running out of names. Like, there's not that many good names left. Everybody's kind of, you know, had some type of version of it, and so they just started. I guess I kind of get it. It's like, well, we're not going to be that serious anymore. You know, like, why does metal have to be all skulls and crossbones and scary? You know, why can't we just be silly and have a silly name? So I kind of get it.
At some point, that yeah, all the metal bands, it's like their names sort of turned. It was like they were all like Morrissey or Smith's titles. They're all like long sentences. It's like these arms are snakes.
Yeah, you're right. Well, and then the Christian metal scene got popular too, and I think that, you know, that was kind of, I guess the good thing about the Christian metal scene was that it got metal popular. You know, it was like a big. I don't know if you kept up with it at all, but like, you know, a lot of the Under Oath and As I Lay Dying was kind of considered a Christian metal band. And I don't know, do you know who As I Lay Dying is?
I know the band. I
Yeah,
even almost said that name.
yeah, yeah. That's one of the cool names. But it's funny because the singer, I don't even know if they're gonna do music anymore, because I don't know if you heard the story about the singer. He got arrested because he tried to hire a hitman to kill his wife.
Oh, okay. Maybe that does sound familiar now that you say that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really Christian. But
Exactly. Exactly. You know, and I grew up in the church. I was brought up in Southern Baptist Church in West Virginia till, you know, I was pretty much made to go to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night till I was, you know, probably 14 or 15. And I was pushing against it for kind of years before that, because, you know, it wasn't super conservative, but it was conservative. So there was a time where I wasn't really allowed to buy music or go to the movies. But once those walls crumbled, you know, it felt like I was, you know, oh, finally I can dive into this stuff that I've been kept away from. So in a way, I, you know, have to sort of laugh. It's like, oh, sorry, Mom, the stuff you tried to keep me away from is pretty much what I do with my life now.
do you think that's a part of it, like suppressing? Because I was raised a Catholic. I was born in Portugal, and my parents are really like old school Portuguese, and you know, they're farmers, so they all grow up, you know, going to church. But church there is very different. Like I remember the village where I was born and stuff. I wasn't there for long because we ended up coming in the U.S. when I was still very little, but. The church was different because, like, the priests, like, everybody went to the church, and like everybody got married for free, and when somebody was sick, the priest would come to your house and check up on them and see how they're doing. And it seemed a lot like it seems like America's kind of like, even capitalism polluted churches. You know, it's like it seemed like, even though I'm not a religious person, I mean, I guess I'm an atheist, I guess, if I had to pick a title. But and I'm not sold on the atheist idea. I always say that. I'm like, I could be wrong. So I'm not one of those people that hardcore atheists or hardcore Christians or hardcore. I'm one of those people that I believe that it's like, for anybody who says they have the truth with a capital T, you know, it's like, you got to take a step back and be like, well, do you really? Because nobody really knows. So it's just like, you have a hunch, you have a feeling, you have a theory, and you know, anybody could be wrong. I could be wrong. You know, who knows? You know, so but it's one of those things where it seems like in Portugal, like, even though they had a church, and I wouldn't say anti-religion, religion, but I wouldn't have such a negative outlook on religion if I lived in Portugal. If I still lived in like that village where the priests, really, there wasn't much to hate or dislike what the church was doing, you know, and I wonder if maybe America, even the capitalism, you know, even affected that, where anytime somebody sees a way to make money, you know, it pollutes everything, unions, you know, churches, everything. But I don't even know where I was going with that. I think I wanted that.
There's been a lot of things that sort of have sort of ruined it in a way. And yeah, if you were still back in that village, I mean, it would play a much more integral role in that community, because you have probably a smaller community. There's your baker, there's your, you know, your butcher, there's your cobbler, here's your priest, and it probably played a much more kind of intimate and real and actually helped people kind of role. And I guess, yeah, we have have we kind of evolved away from that here in the States? Has it been all ruined by stupid televangelists and sort of rip off mega churches and all those things? I think there's probably no one answer to it, but I don't know. I mean, that's the battle. I mean, so there's the new, I haven't watched it yet, but there's the new Cosmos show.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet either, but
It's getting lots of attention, and Neil deGrasse Tyson is the science rock star. But there were articles basically sort of saying, is Cosmos sort of launching? I think they're coming at it from the angle of, is this launching the new salvo in the war, of pro science, because we have a bunch of wacky religion stuff and anti-global warming, and is it a propaganda piece pushing back against everyone else?
well, I know that he was influenced by Carl Sagan, and like I think he was like 17 and met him, and like was a huge influence on him. So even if it is like a propaganda piece, I think, and isn't it a remake? Wasn't there original Cosmos?
It is, yeah.
Right?
It was a Carl Sagan series.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, yeah, and well, I guess what better person than Neil deGrasse Tyson then, but he is making like science cool. He can the way he's he doesn't have any type of like social anxiety or he doesn't he's very comfortable when he's public speaking and when he's doing shows and interviews and he's always very excited, and I think that that comes off and people enjoy that, and it's a lot better than somebody gives you information in a monotone type voice, you're not going to listen or pay attention for long, especially like today, because we're constantly distracted by everything. Our phones going off, TVs, whatever. That's why everybody has ADD today, or at least that's what the pharmaceutical company is trying to convince us. But it's just one of those things where he keeps your attention. He makes things exciting and whatnot, and I think that's a good thing, because I think that it seems like science, it's one of those things that it kind of nobody really it's not sexy anymore for like the young crowd. Nobody really, you think of science, you think nerdy, you think, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that he's making it sexy again. Maybe sexy is the wrong word, but he's making it appealing again to and maybe making people pay attention to things, because I think there's something interesting about, like, especially like you and me, we both talk a lot about current events and what's going on in the media, and the thing is that like we focus what's going on this like little planet, there's one planet, and it's just like when you listen to somebody like Carl Sagan or Neil deGrasse Tyson, like we remember that what's going on this planet seems so little, and so it's crazy because we're focused in, like, we're in this box, and it's like there's so much else we still don't understand, that sometimes these little issues almost seem not as important, or maybe that's not the right way of putting it, but it just seems like, holy shit, like we're so focused on what's going on in this box that it's like there's this whole other universe out there that, we still know so little about, and there's still a lot about, I guess, the human species and that we still don't know a lot about. Why do we dream? Why does our body decide to make us forget our dreams? Why, it's just all these things that we still don't know. And it was funny because I had Greg Carlwood from the Higher Side Chats on my last show, and I was telling him, we talked something, I think, along these lines. I remember saying that fish would be the last people, or the last animal to understand water, because they're in it, and it's just like, you look at like beginning of civilization, like when they didn't understand something, they thought they understood something. They thought they understood the earth was flat. They thought they understood that when somebody got sick, it was a demon trying to come out of them. So they had to, burn them at the stake, and it's just like, who knows if like 100 years from now, we're going to look back and say, holy shit, Ricky and James were so far from the truth. They had no understanding of how the universe works. So, I mean, it makes you wonder, how, all those other, I guess, bigger questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you even say, I thought you were going to say something about sneezing, because that's what I thought of. Because I'm trying to break myself of saying bless you. Because when you stop and think of it, it's like, that's the stupidest thing in the world. Why do we do, like, I can't believe we still, oh, bless you. So, cram your soul back in because it's trying to escape while you sneeze. It's like, that's ridiculous. Why do I even waste the breath to say something like that? Well, I don't say bless you when you cough or fart or do any other bodily thing. Why not?
Well, that's the weird thing about traditions. And it's funny because I've had this similar debate with my girlfriend about, would you want to have your kids baptized, or would you want to, and it's like, even though neither of us are really religious. I mean, I don't go to, I was, I got my first communion and all that stuff, but basically once I had the ability to think for myself and make my own decisions, I stopped going, and, I don't ever choose to go again. So but she's like, well, it's tradition. I think my family would like it. I think it's like, it's one of those things where just like, we're convinced that, like, because it's tradition, it's a good thing. But it's like, well, why not make our own tradition? And honestly, I think our age group is probably going to be one of the last age groups that are going to have a lot of kids baptized and this and that. Because I think as like people, it seems like the younger generation is getting a little less religious, you know, and maybe, you know, maybe it's a tradition that's going to end up fading away in time, but it's to do something just because it's tradition or because somebody told you to, and you're kind of I don't know, just basically just did it without thinking about it. We should really start thinking about why are we doing things, you know? And it's funny because I've thought about the same thing. Like, okay, why do I say God bless you? Okay, we say it because at one time somebody believed some demon could get in you or come out of you or whatever. I'm like, that's insane. So why do I continue to say it? You know? But I think after a while, you know, the root of whatever reason we do things are lost anyways. So, I mean, you're really saying it just because we see it as society sees it as a polite thing to do. And, you know, but you're right. It does seem kind of, you know, insane, the fact that we still say it.
Absolutely. Well, no, I think you're dead on, and that's something I think with myself over the last few years. And as you know, as you start to get a little bit older and think about, yeah, I find I don't have a lot of use for traditions, whether those are holidays or sayings or any of those kind of things. On the one hand, or at least point one, Doug Stanhope, comedian that I like, because he's now he gets lots of attention now online, finally on YouTube and stuff. But he says, you know, traditions, all that stuff, it's dead people's baggage. Stop carrying it. And I also even saw a quote the other day from, I'm not even actually sure where it's sourced from, but it's Woody Allen said, tradition is the illusion of permanence. That we're tricking ourselves into going, oh yeah, this is forever. This is going to last forever. I find, yeah, as the years go by, I mean, I think for a lot of people would say, well, I don't really give a shit about Christmas other than that's the time I get to see the people I love. And ultimately that's the most important part about it. That's what it is about. But I find as the years go by, you know, holidays and this and that, it's like, I don't care at all. It's like it's a bunch of made up shit that's been changed from what it was supposed to mean anyway. It doesn't even mean the thing we thought it meant. Oh, let's all do St. Patrick's Day. Oh, except, well, you know, it's all maybe apocryphal and maybe he was actually Italian, or yeah, it just seems like it's a bunch of Hallmark holidays and a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah. Well, Jehovah's, they don't believe in holidays, and not that I'm defending Jehovah's, but what I had this debate once, and it's funny because I contradict myself sometimes, not because I haven't, because I think that we should always self-analyze, and no matter what your beliefs or theories are, I think we should always you know, leave them open to change. You know, I think that I haven't consumed all the information I can, so I can't properly say, hey, this is my opinion, it's set in stone and whatnot. And even religion, I remember having almost, I think the same day or in the same 2 days, I remember defending or not defending traditions like, you know, holidays and stuff like that. And then the next day having a debate with a friend of mine who's a Jehovah. And he was saying, you know, I ended up defending him because I want to be a devil's advocate. And he's like, yeah, what's the point of having, but I'm like, well, what's the point of not doing it? I'm like, people, you know, don't get me wrong. I think we all understand Christmas is a business thing. I mean, people, they sell the idea of Christmas for financial gain, and for that, you know, for all the quarterly gains at those 3 months around Christmas. But I think that if nothing else, if it gives people reason to get family together and spend time together, then I guess it's not the worst thing in the world. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. I agree with you. I think the roots of it, nobody really pays it. I mean, it's not like anybody celebrating any religious thing or anything like that, you know? So the way I look at it, it's like, well, it's not the worst thing in the world that people are finding a reason to get together and, you know, especially today, because it's like we live in this world where just like we're constantly busy and don't have time for anything, and you know, they make us, well, they don't make us, but they kind of brainwash us into creating debt at a young age, so then we become a slave to this corporate machine, just, you know, constantly working and, you know, and buying stuff we don't need. And then, you know, this month or this day out of the year, we spend some time with the family and we kind of forget about that stuff. But there's definitely some people who don't use it for good and end up just finding a reason to fight over toys on Black Friday and whatnot, so it definitely, there's some pros and cons, and no matter what my opinion is, I always try to find a happy medium where it's like, well, let me be the devil's advocate to even my own opinion, in my own debate, and try to see if there's something good out of it, and
And it comes down to ultimately whether it's Christmas or whether it's a religion or a belief that you hold. It's like if that makes you feel good, go for it.
yeah, yeah. I think that's kind of a simple way to looking at everything. It's like, I mean, it's almost like the libertarian debate against, whatever. And I always say, well, why do we have to put, a title on something? Let's just say, if it doesn't harm anybody, and you, according to, what this country is founded on, we have the right to pursue happiness. Then as long as I have the right to pursue happiness and I'm not affecting anybody else's right to pursue happiness, then why can't we do it? And that's kind of the way I look at it. If you're not harming anybody, if you're not hurting anybody, then I don't care what the law says, then you shouldn't really feel bad about doing it.
Well, so you just kind of made me think of this. Maybe this will flip it a little bit. And this is the joke I always have to make to folks when I'm on their show. It's like, see, this is what you get when you have a host in their own right on your show. Because, okay, here's the next topic. Because you're talking about harm and you're talking about law.
Yep.
I have to kind of stop my wild optimism. It's like when I saw the headline the other day, Colorado homeless lining up for pot jobs. It's like, wow. It's like if I didn't know better, I would think, hey, guess what? That's the solution to all our fucking problems right there. Grow more pot and have homeless people. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's if I'm a hippie kumbaya moment, but ultimately, hemp, industrial hemp, food, textiles, resources, fuel, medicine, all of those things are all there, and we could start doing that right now. And so I don't know. I love seeing the headlines over the last several months out of Washington and out of Colorado saying, jails empty out all the, marijuana offenders, cops tearing up, the paperwork for shit they're not doing anymore. I see that as a wildly positive thing, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I mean, Portugal is kind of the example to what possibly decriminalizing drugs can be. I had Dr. Gregory Smith from the movie American Addict on, and we talked about the Portugal experiment for a while, and he actually made a good point, because I always use the debate, well, Portugal's a good example. Obviously, it seems like that's the right direction to go. They proved that it worked. Case closed. But he made a good point. He's like, it worked because it's a small country, and in a bigger country like this, it might not work, and or at least it'd be more complicated. And so he kind of made me rethink my whole opinion on that too. And I think that he's, and especially weed. I think marijuana should. I don't even smoke weed, and but I'm always talking about how. Not so much because I think that everybody should smoke weed, but I don't care what people do, as long as, if I have the right to go buy alcohol or go buy cigars or whatever, and why don't people have the right to smoke weed? I mean, I'm convinced that obviously it was a big money scheme, and
that's why I was like, well, the answer to that.
Yeah, well, I do know the answer to that. You're right, but my big thing is just what bothered me so much, and what made me so passionate about the weed argument was the fact that people who again, it's like one of those things, like you said, God bless you. Why do you say that? It's because you were taught at a young age to say it, and then eventually we do it without ever even thinking about it. And same thing with the weed argument. I know people who I know somebody who their daughter was sick, and I forget what it was, what medical condition she had, but marijuana would help. But she was like, I don't know, 17 or whatever she was, and she was always told the marijuana was bad. And her dad, who doesn't even smoke weed, just wanted to help her daughter, said, you should really think about smoking weed. It'll help. And she's like, no, I won't. I'm not going to do drugs. And it's just like, it's like these things. It's almost like we mold people into believing, something, and then it's so hard to break that mold, and it's just, even, like the God bless you thing, why do we say it? We don't ever question it. We just do it. Same thing, like, okay, marijuana's bad. They've taught us that for all these years. They've brainwashed us to believe that in schools. And then people grow up and they don't ever question it, and that's such a hard mold to break, and I think
it's against the law. Against the law. It's against the law. You can't do it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it's one of those things where it drives me crazy, because when you see documentaries like the one which was awesome, the Dr. Sanjay Gupta one that ended up airing on CNN, like it was like anybody who watches that documentary and says that it doesn't piss you off that there's these people who they could have a better life. They could have, or they could get off all these pharmaceutical drugs by taking this natural plant that has not been proven at all to have any real long-term effects or any real negative effects on people. But yet it's suppressed from them just for the sake of whatever, because of the history of it, of the money issue. Then that's crazy. How does that not bother you? And I don't even smoke weed, like I said, but it was the fact that knowing that it could help people and it had so many medical benefits. I mean, the first American flag was, made out of hemp. The fenders on the Henry Ford's first production car, I believe, was made out of hemp. I mean, you could still import hemp. You just can't grow it, which is another, ridiculous law. And it just... to take a step back and take a look at that and see, like, there was like some little girl who's having seizures. It's like she has to wake up every single day with seizures and deal with that every single day just because, the government, just wants, they don't want to make something legal they can't tax. It's like, it's insane. I'm like, how does that not bother people? How does that not because I'm saying I'm pro marijuana, I'm pro anything that will help people, and doesn't make any fucking sense. And it doesn't make any sense, so
and that's been the change, I think, and probably this happens on a lot of levels with a lot of different things. The change really happens when it affects someone personally, when that dad who maybe was anti suddenly goes, oh wait, this works as a medicine, my daughter feels better, or my ailing grandmother feels better. So then when they see that and it affects them firsthand, well, then they're a convert. And now we've got people like Pat Robertson, the televangelist. He's pretty much come out and said, well, I can't in good conscience be against something that helps people, because he's now seen it with his eyes. So there's so many kind of contradictory things, but you actually remind me, and I'll just throw it out right here because I kind of forgot, but I'll still mention it. Today is my 20th month since I quit smoking cigarettes.
Congratulations.
And I smoked cigarettes for about 17 years. It was bad.
Congratulations, man. How'd you do it? Did you hypnotist, cold turkey, patch?
I went cold, angry turkey.
Really?
I did, because I looked at it and I thought about doing the e-cigarettes and I just felt like all those things were all just some other crutch. And with e-cigarettes, it's like, well, you're cutting out the worst stuff. You're cutting out the tar and smoke and all that stuff, but you're still addicted to nicotine. It's like, that's the problem. It's like I'm not addicted to the tar and the carcinogens. I'm addicted to the nicotine. Why keep myself stuck on? I feel like when you stay stuck on that, you're just keeping yourself that much closer to at any point going, oh, well, fuck it, I'll just have a cigarette.
Yeah, well, that's kind of true. I mean, that makes sense. I feel
and I had to just stop it. And I knew, because I couldn't just do because there are people who can kind of just drink a little. I can kind of just drink a little bit and it's not a big deal. But cigarettes, I was full on. So it was hard. I quit cold turkey. It was rough months and months, and just kind of slowly got better and better. But it got better by eating better and exercising. Holy crap. Can you imagine? Stop the presses. If you eat better and exercise, you will feel better.
That is news. I think that's breaking news. CNN will have that for breaking news for about 6 months.
And I now run a couple of miles every other day. I'm not going to turn into super, fitness man, but just doing some simple stuff. And my girlfriend's been amazing in that, in helping me, with food and exercise and health. But what I was going to say, in talking about all this kind of contradictions, is she and I both kind of find ourselves, because we both work in media and audio and video. And you find yourself sometimes at events for, the sustainability committee meeting, where they're all drinking sodas out of plastic and are all wildly overweight, or it's the cancer fundraiser, which will be filled with a bunch of antibacterial obsessed people who have doused themselves in cologne and parabens and all that shit. So it's like, have you maybe stopped to think that's where the fucking cancer comes from? I'm glad you said we could swear, so now I'm real
Yeah, no, you can definitely swear. That's one thing we try to do here is keep it unprofessional.
Well, and again, that's something growing up. It's like, oh, those words are bad. And then you get older, it's like they're just words. They're just syllables in a certain way that at some point people are like, oh, that's bad.
Yeah, no,
Like
that's
sometimes it's fun. It's fun to use them to get a point across. That's what they're for.
yeah, absolutely. And I feel like they're all there, so you might as well use them, you know. And the way I look at it, the cool thing about this podcasting thing is there's no wrong or right way to doing it. Like we, you know, all the other podcasters I've had on here, like we've all talked about it, you know, I don't know, on air or off air, and just like there's no right way or wrong way of doing this. And the cool thing about doing this is that I think people enjoy the fact that it sounds like two people having a conversation. I think that's why Howard people liked Howard Stern. That's why people like Opie and Anthony. I think people like they swear, they're silly because that's how people really act. And it was, you know, people got sick of the domestic radio of, okay, now we go to the news, now we do that, so I have these questions I have to ask, and you usually, you know, the guest usually already has like some standard answer to it, and then it just seems boring, and every show you see the same guests on, you hear the same answers, and it's just one of those things where it just I think people want that sound of just people sitting down, like almost like being at a bar having a drink and bullshitting about life and personal philosophies, you know.
Absolutely.
And
I can definitely tell you though that because I've been for the last year and a half. I actually my jobby job is actually in commercial radio, and I work at a news station. It's a I don't know. It's been interesting because I've basically tried to avoid it for the for the most part. You know, I've always liked to I do my own independent art, you know, by my rules. And then in the past, I've usually worked at, you know, some type of, you know, grocery store, restaurant, bought something that would feed me, literally.
yeah, yeah.
But being at a radio station now, as someone who stopped listening to terrestrial commercial radio years ago, it's interesting to me to kind of see it's like, oh, there's still this whole, I don't want to call it scene. There's still a whole bunch of people who this is their whole world. They get all their news, all their everything from commercial filled, you know, talk radio. And I find myself now going, oh, wow, this is going back to what we were talking about. Traditions are going to fall by the wayside. That's the kind of stuff I think as time goes by, it's going to less and less and less people are going to be listening to it. And just as the same way, you know, every year it's like, oh, you know, movies made, you know, record-setting amount of money by less and less people paying more and more on their ticket prices. That's the dirty secret, is it's less people paying more for, you know, the same kind of junk. So it's interesting to me to find, you know, and to hear and see emails and phone calls from all those folks. It's sort of like, oh my God, it's like you kind of just, and it's good in a way that that they're now hearing interesting ideas. But I can't help but find myself going, oh my God, like you're way behind. Like you should be way more further along than you are. But that may be just my own snottiness. And I think I've been into the new. That's, you know, whether it's, you know, ideas or film or music or any of that kind of stuff. I feel like I've always, not like I'm futuristic or anything, but I've always felt like I'm waiting for people to catch up, whether it's, you know, musically or media or, you know, I think we were talking just a little bit ago, you know, maybe that is why we're all sort of wiggy, because we all have a million devices and stuff to kind of look at and pay attention to. I find with myself, I feel like it's kind of caught up to me and with what I like to do and with where I am. Because now I finally can play records and talk to my buddy and write a review and work on a show and have all those things going. It's like, yeah, this is what I do. And for me, that's the best ideal of what I want media monarchy to be is my own, you know, sort of natural interests. And that's why it does encompass new music and a weird occult story and true crime and all of those things that I'm interested in. I can now have, you know, they have a home and an outlet. So I've enjoyed the changes of the last 10 years, especially. I find, you know, it's, you know, yeah, finally things are starting to progress and kind of move along in a way.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a plus to all the technology and all that stuff. I definitely think that it's cool that we have like this. I mean, this kind of, or at least for the moment, this no boundaries type of thing like the internet, where we can post whatever we want. We can, with very minimum cost, we can do. Somebody could start a podcast. People can do music. I mean, I do music, and I can completely bypass a record company now. I mean, my music's on iTunes and Amazon and Shazam and all that stuff, and I can, I don't have to get a record company. I remember when we first started playing, me and my brother, we had a band growing up, and we first started playing music. We used to send out cassette tapes of our demos to record labels and stuff like that. And it's like, now it's like, why would I even want a record label deal? It's like, I just want to, I can put this stuff out for free. I can, I can promote stuff online for free. There's definitely a lot of positives. I guess the negative is the people who use it just for entertainment reasons and just keep up with just you're following the Kardashians on Twitter, so it's just like you're constantly consuming information, but it's worthless information that's probably making you dumber instead of any smarter. And so I definitely think that there's pros and cons to it. I mean, the cool thing is that I think I saw a study in like 2020. I think 66% of the world's going to have access to some type of internet, which is pretty insane when you think about it. It's one of those things where the internet, more things are free today than they've ever been. When you look at your access to information, your access. If I'm going to a wedding and last second I don't know how to tie a tie, I can go on and YouTube it, and I've done it. I've YouTubed.
Me too.
And yeah, I think us casual guys who don't wear ties often probably have done it, and so we could do that. So I mean, years ago, what would we do? So it's like if you want to cook something different, if you're lucky enough to have a girlfriend who wants to cook, and for you, she can go online and find a recipe to your favorite dish, and so it's one of those things where just, it's cool because we have access to all this information. And so that's definitely a plus. I mean, but don't you feel like there's also an issue with the fact that we don't have any self-reflecting time? Like I smoke cigars, and not when I first started smoking cigars, it wasn't because I actually knew anything about cigars or I even like really gave a shit about cigars, as much as I liked the fact that I had a buddy who smoked them, and I'd be at his house, we'd be having a drink. He's like, "Hey, you want a cigar?" I'd be like, "Why not?" And we'd have a cigar and we'd sit there, and there's something about turning everything off and just sitting down, and almost like podcasting. You're sitting down and saying, I'm taking this 1 hour out of my day, or 2 or 3 hours out of my day to just sit down with somebody and have a conversation, bounce ideas off each other, and so then that's why I got into it, because I enjoyed the relaxing and just sitting down. It gave me a reason to slow down and kind of self-reflect and bounce ideas off each other. And I think that too many of us don't have that opportunity. We're constantly going to the gym and doing this, and then got to go pick up the kids, and our phone's going off, and then we're doing this. And it's like we don't have any time to self-reflect, and we don't have any time to really put things in perspective and what's important in life. And then we just become this, we get stuck in this cycle of just buying things, creating debt, then having to work more to pay off that debt, then buying more shit, and then creating debt, and just like this vicious cycle. So I think that's important, So there's definitely pros and cons of technology. I mean, I'm guessing even though you use technology for obviously all your hobbies and stuff like that, and your work, do you still find time to relax and reflect and like do you have some hobby? I mean, well, running's pretty a good time for meditation, kind of. No.
It is, and and it's sometimes I find myself, just because of the schedule, I end up usually running, around noon, and that's the time where it sometimes feels like it's too busy out because people are on their lunch breaks, and so there are times where I kind of think, oh man, I should be running at midnight, not noon, when there's no one out, and there really is, and there was when I started to run, and it was at I was running more to not be freaking out from kicking cigarettes. Running at night in the summer, like, this is awesome.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
that was kind of, I think, that reflective time. I probably, in a way, my running now has probably gotten a little too routine, in that it's probably not as like you said, self-reflective or relaxing and meditative as it once was. And I think I maybe need to change up the routine a little bit, maybe run a little longer, maybe take a different route, because there are some times where, and again, maybe that is another use for it, is you are kind of running out all your, like, you do want to kind of run out your angries and get all that out and just kind of sweat and purge all that stuff out. So it does. That definitely helps. And as you were talking about smoking a cigar, I'm thinking back to, when I smoked cigarettes, was that a self-reflective moment? And it was at times, but I think it reached the point for me, and that's, and even sort of helping break that conditioning in a way. Now I look back on it and saying, you weren't really, all cigarettes are doing is sort of like you're waiting to do something else. Like
Yeah,
it's sort of always just well, I'm going to do this before I do this other thing.
that's kind
And
of true.
all your body and all your brain is thinking, from the second you put that cigarette out, so when are we smoking again? It's just that it's a horrible cycle. So I do need more. I definitely need more kind of relaxation time. And again, that's something that Cassie is great at, and just trying to sort of like, okay, like let's bring it down. I also find just listening to records is a big help. I remember one time, this has been years ago, but I have one sibling, my older brother, and he's the one who really turned me on to alternative music. He was the one who had, punk rock cassette tapes that he wasn't supposed to have, and that's what got me into all of this stuff. It's kind of funny that something that was sort of a passing fancy for him, completely fundamentally kind of changed me and my outlook and what I ended up doing with my life, because I heard Jello Biafra and Dead Kennedys and Minor Threat and the Beastie Boys and all that stuff at a young age. But I remember I was listening to music, and my brother walked by, and he kind of looked at me and saw me just standing there, kind of, probably just kind of staring off or staring at the player. He's like, "What are you doing?" It's like, "I'm listening to music." That to him, it sort of seemed like, it's like, "What's your problem? Like, are you okay?" It was like, "Of course I'm okay. I'm listening to this music." And I think that really struck me. It's like, oh, you don't get that? And so there are probably a lot of folks who may, and for me, that's a huge thing. I grew up, like I said, had the Christian kind of upbringing where there wasn't music, but Dad was still the choir director in church, and he sang in a rock band back in the day. So I knew it wasn't allowed, but I knew if we scratched just kind of behind the surface, it was like, you guys are totally into music. And they were and are, and it was just kind of pushed away for a little while. So I have, fond memories of, playing 8-track tapes or trying to listen to the radio, or, I remember my great aunt at one point gave me a little AM/FM radio that I hid under my pillow. And that's really when I started to listen to radio as like a, 11-year-old. And it was just listening to the, the terrible local, top 40 station. But even then it was great. And I would just, listen to it to fall asleep. And that's, I think, probably carries on to this day, because even when you just rang me here on Skype, what was the first thing you heard? You heard my record player before you heard me, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree. Music it's weird, because that was like my first, like, without even knowing it, I was probably meditating and growing up writing music, and I would just try to get in the right mindset. Sometimes a lot of times actually, I would spend in my room just with doors locked, and I would just play some record, play the couple albums that I really liked, and to get me in the right mindset, and just just sit there for hours, and people would be like, "What are you doing?" I remember the girlfriend I had at the time be like, "Oh, what are you gonna do today?" I'm like, "I'm probably gonna spend a couple hours like sitting in my room listening to music and looking through like the album covers." There's still something I like about buying albums. Like I still order my albums online and or buy them physically, at a concert when I can, because I still enjoy the artwork and reading the lyrics and like the whole thing. The album isn't just the digital music, but it's usually the artist has a look and feel and something that they're trying to capture, and you can get that a lot better when you get the whole album, you get the lyrics, you get all that stuff, and it's that's definitely lost today. We there's going to be a generation where people are going to be like, "What the fuck's that album and what's FYE?" And I think we're but it's like, I'm gonna sound old even though I'm not even 30 yet, but it's definitely one of those things where just like kids are losing that, and now you're gonna get less and less good albums, I think, because of the fact that people can just buy a song, and it's just like you buy that song you like, and people are gonna focus more on singles than they are doing a full album from cover to cover. But the cool thing, I might be wrong, because the cool thing about music today is that you don't need mainstream media or to put out a single. You can completely promote online. I bring my girlfriend to shows. I remember when we first started dating years ago. She just listened to top 40s. She liked whatever was on the radio, and I'd bring her to these shows, and she's like, "Who the fuck is this band you're bringing me to?" I'm like, "You'll enjoy. Just come to the show. You'll enjoy the energy. Even if you don't like the music, you'll enjoy the energy and stuff." And I remember bringing her to a show, and she didn't know who the band was, but the show was sold out. You couldn't move, and she's like, "How do all these people know who this is?" I'm like, "That's the beautiful thing about the internet." I'm like, You can tell domestic radio to suck a fat one, and you can just put your shit online and not give a shit. So that's the cool thing, is that you don't have to tone your stuff down. You don't have to censor it. You don't have to, maybe make one single on the album so it can get played on the radio. Now you can completely promote online, and you can, put out the music that you truly like. And the cool thing about art, and music is art, just like comedy and film and all the other art forms, is that anytime you restrict it, you're not getting the real good version of it. You're censoring it, because art sometimes will take you places that maybe mainstream might not want you to go, or might not want to put on the radio, or might not want to show on TV. So it just, I think you almost have to write. And at a young age, I did it, where I would censor myself at times. I'm like, wait, somebody's going to listen to this sometime. I'm like, I'm not sure I want to go that personal, or I want to talk about that subject or whatever. And then I'm like, you know what? I have to write this music. Like, I'm the only one who's going to listen to it. And then, and then I guess put it out there and just feel comfortable with the fact that it's personal and it's important to me. So I definitely think that I think I went on a rant and lost track of what my point was.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting, and I've thought about this before, that we're talking about, the loss of the album. Is that something, though, that kids behind us are going to go, yeah, that album is an outdated tradition. We don't give a shit about that anymore. Just like we're saying about other traditions.
Yeah.
About, maybe in some way, because album can mean a couple of different things. I mean, album can mean what you were kind of saying, the physical. You mean a vinyl record.
Yeah.
That has a big sleeve and a cover, and that's an album. But you can also use album as in a complete work meant to be listened to in one sitting. Like, oh, I put that album together. These songs all fit together for a reason. Have we run some sort of, has that run its course? Because it wasn't always that way. It used to be just single based. It was only when, we hit the 60s era, and before, of course, too, because it was jazz, that albums, as a whole piece, became a thing. And maybe it's gone through its whole cycle, and maybe we've seen the best of what someone can do with an album. I don't really believe that, but who knows? Maybe other people kind of think it is an outdated, form. I still find value and pleasure in it, and I find the albums that I enjoy the most are the ones that go together, that have a theme running through it, even to the point sometimes where there'll be recurring motifs and melodies of music that will kind of pop back in. There's been Cursive I like a lot. They're out of Omaha. They're an indie band. They're on Saddle Creek Records, which is Bright Eyes and The Faint and Cursive, and they're all actually from Omaha and all started playing in bands together as kids. So that, to me, I look at that and it's like, that's how you do it. It's like you started your own scene and now look at it. But a lot of Cursive albums, at least their last 4 albums, have all basically been kind of concept albums that you can listen to them and rock out and they're awesome. But if you really listen to them and hear them, there's a storyline running through each of them. And I find, and there'll be melodies and things that kind of recur, and those are my favorite kind of albums, are things that that are meant to be listened to as a one piece. The flip side to that is, like I said, I now work at a radio station where I know all the pop songs, dude. I know I know all the current hit songs, and I end up, because I hear them so much, they get stuck into my head. And then I come home and Cassie's like, oh my. It's like, that's Lady Gaga. It's like, I know, I'm sorry, I can't help it.
Yeah, that does kind of suck. I mean, but the thing is, I go out to eat with my girlfriend, and we'll go grab a drink somewhere, and that's all you hear when you're out. So it's just like, or if I'm at the gym, that's all I hear. So it's like, it's unavoidable. the thing is that like I always feel like true music fans aren't, they're not people who listen to the top 40s. They're people who they go out, they try to search for certain specific music they like. They like something deeper. I always wonder because I would get in a debate with a buddy of mine who would defend like he was in like a poppy band or whatever, a poppy like I wouldn't call it, it's indie but like a real poppy type of indie, and it's just one of those things where I'm just like, I'm like, I don't know, man. I just don't like pop music. They're like, well, it's popular for a reason, and I'm always like, yeah, I guess. And then, or I would have somebody who's really into a band that's really popular, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't. I mean, maybe it's your thing, but it's not my thing. I'm like, and they're like, well, if all these people like it, it has to be good. And I would always like argue, get in that debate about if something's popular, does it have to be good? And I wonder if it's one of those things where it goes all the way back to like evolution, and like we always try to find the easiest ways to do things. Like we always try to, we made the wheel, we created fire because we're always trying to, we keep trying to make things quicker and faster, technology better, just so we can take shortcuts and find an easier way. I wonder if music, in some sense, is also motivated by that. We want what's easy. We put on music. We want something that we don't necessarily have to analyze to understand. And do you think that maybe there's anything to that, or am I just crazy?
Well, I might even take it further and say, is that a similar thing as people who were just brought up in the church? Well, no, it's good. This is what we do. It's good, right? I kind of see some way in that same way. It's like, that's the thing, you're spoon-fed, and that's why you think it's good. I watched a video, one of my favorite YouTube channels, and ideally, and I feel like I am at somewhat of a crossroads with media monarchy and where it's been and where it's going. In a way, I'd love to somehow be some kind of synthesis of two of my favorite, outlets. That's Corbett Report, and there's a show on YouTube called The Needle Drop, and it's a dude who reviews records. And it's mostly indie, and he does a lot of metal and a lot of hip hop, neither of which I'm huge into, but he does record reviews. And I was like, yeah, if I could put those two together, then I could, harness the power. But he put up episode on The Needle Drop recently asking the question, if something, this is the reverse of what you were saying, just because something is really popular, does that automatically make it bad? That coming from the standpoint of sort of the indie snob, who sort of like me would go, well, if that many people like it, it has to sort of reach some sort of lowest common denominator that all you guys think this song is great because it has to hit. And that's the thing. And again, I see that getting so frustrated with how slow everything works. Radio can't just play a song because it's awesome. They've got to market test it and research it and see if it fits for their demographic. And if some other demographic is already playing it, well, I don't think we can play that song. It's just such kind of a disgusting, lame business. And it's like, yeah, that's why people stop listening to the radio.
Well, is it kind of similar to cars? Because you look at it, why do like the Civic and the Camry sell so well? A lot of people who are in the cars, I'm actually, I'm a car guy, I get car and driver and stuff like that. And the one thing you always heard about, why the Camry and the Civic and the Accord did so well, because it didn't offend anybody. It was the most popular, but it was most popular because it didn't break any boundaries. It didn't do anything that was out of, that caught your eye. It was just very plain. It didn't offend anybody. So I wonder if music's kind of similar. It's like
that's what I think about like Coldplay.
Yeah.
It's like they're just inoffensive and everybody just loves them and thinks they're great. And I just think they're just watered down third generation Radiohead crap.
They really are. There's so much. It's weird how like a lot of bands that are popular, you kind of hear influences from other, more underground genres, and you're like, well, they like it because it's kind of like this underground genre. Just they did like a pop twist to it and made it more, easier to digest.
That's I think Kanye's new record. His latest one, Jesus, it's like, oh man, it's so amazing. He's revolutionizing hip hop. It's like, yeah, by ripping off Saul Williams. Like that sound, and actually, I don't know if you're familiar with Saul Williams. He kind of blew up in the early '90s in the kind of the slam poetry scene, which was a thing. And he did spoken word poetry and made some recordings. And then DJs asked him to do, a poem on top of, DJ Crush, I think was one of the first folks who had Saul Williams on one of their tracks. And then people heard him, and then he made his first album with Rick Rubin, who I think's a genius
Yeah, he's
producer.
done everything.
Uh-huh.
He worked with he worked with rappers. I mean, he was a big part of the new metal scene when the new metal scene was getting popular. He worked with, Slipknot and System of a Down and
Uh-huh.
Stain, who actually is from my hometown. Mike Mushak, the guitarist, is from my
Huh.
hometown. And actually he went to school with my co-host who isn't with me today, but he went to school with Mike Mushak, and yeah, so he worked with everybody, and you're right, he kind of, it's hard to argue that he isn't a genius, because to work with that many people who were successful and work with that many different genres of music, and the fact that he's a like fat guy with a beard who could play Santa around Christmas time, and yet like he's hanging out. You see pictures of him with Jay-Z and Kanye West, and they're all giving him props, and I'm like, this guy has to be good because he obviously doesn't fit in.
Well, and yeah, I almost look at him as like you even just described, it's like he's almost like a Buddha. Like I look at him and he seems very at peace and he does his thing. But when I'd actually tweeted that what I just said about Kanye, yeah, he revolutionized hip hop by ripping off Saul Williams. Saul Williams actually retweeted that tweet.
Really,
So
that's
it's like,
awesome.
see, I was like, because I'm right.
Somebody agrees with you.
So it's that thing where it gets imitated for a mass consumption audience.
Yeah, well,
And does that automatically mean that it's bad? No, I just think, and that's I think where you and I are both kind of coming at it. It's not automatically bad, but when you look at it or listen to it for just a little bit, you can kind of go, there's something missing here. Like it just doesn't, it seems fake.
yeah.
And when I think of, all the biggest stars, and I think she just, whatever list it was, Taylor Swift is, the biggest moneymaker in music right now. It's like, of course she is, because she shills for every single like when her record came out the previous year, there were tie-in, it's CoverGirl, Papa John, like every stupid bullshit product, like there's a tie-in for it. It's like that's why it's successful, because you're a whore for the system.
Well, that, and I think that she also did the Kid Rock thing where they did the country,
Yep.
and pop. I think anytime you can kind of blur the line between just average pop and country, and you can be on both billboards, then that's a huge moneymaker, because now you got
Yeah,
the
it's
country
like,
market. Yeah.
do you want the fiddle version or the no fiddle version?
Exactly. You would hear country singers,
Yep.
groups do like pop songs, and pop singers do country songs, and you just throw a country accent on it and all. I mean, I don't even know what country is anymore. It basically is just pop with like a southern accent. Let's be honest. Like there really
It
isn't
is.
much difference. It's not like back in the day where it was like sad songs and whatnot. Now it's just like they're like big and rich. I mean, people. I don't know. Country's the one type of music that, as many friends that I know that have slowly got into it, I refuse to believe I'm ever gonna even like it just a little bit. I can't say it. I don't. Music to me is always about feeling something. If I can put something on and I feel something emotionally, or if it's heavy, if it's like Old Fear Factory and there's aggression in it, then and if it pumps me up, or if it's something that's stabbing westward. So their old like industrial albums where they were really dark, and it's like whatever it was, I as long as I felt something, I felt like, the music did its job, and I had some connection to it. And then there's a lot of pop stuff where just like it might be just a catchy melody, but I think I've come to terms, and I'm guessing, James, you're similar to me, where you listen to music because you hope to feel something, or have some type of emotional connection with it. But I have to come to terms that there are people out there, which is, it's weird to me because I don't get it, because I'm not like that. But there are people out there who only listen to it because they just want something in the background, or while they're driving, or they only listen to it because it's something that they can bob their head to while they're at the club. It's like, I don't get it. I mean, I guess dance is one of the oldest forms of I guess self-expression or whatnot, and so I kind of understand that part of it, and it is a way of enjoying music. But it's just to only like it for that, and not because you have some emotional connection. But I guess if you dance to it, I guess you must, even if you're not admitting it, it probably is emotionally in some sense moving you, right?
It is, yeah, I would think so, and I'll come back around to that. I think what you're saying, and that's, I think you're exactly right. When we hear the new kind of pop country or pop, it sounds, and I think because it's partially the reality, it sounds like it was made in a boardroom for a specific reason, and there are points on a checklist that need to be included. Like it's a math equation. And I can see the folks who work in the industry, and I think, it's funny, the people who I kind of almost admire the most that I see at my job are the ones who have no illusion about what they're doing, but are good at it like a scientist. It's sort of like, yeah, you're not really an artist, but you're a good scientist. Like, you do your thing well. Like, I hate the product, but damn if you don't do it well. So I think when we hear the fake pop country and pop, it rings false. It does not hit any emotional bells because it sounds like a thing that's just trying to either sell me something, or it's all based on some catchphrase that makes it seem really hip. So yeah, I want an emotional connection. It's funny. You just reminded me. I had never seen the clip. A buddy sent it to me of Phil Anselmo of Pantera talking about how much he fucking loves Morrissey and the Smiths. And listening to him, it only took a couple seconds to hear what the stuff that he was saying. It's like he's obviously a fan. Like, he knows exactly what he's talking about. He knows these albums. That blew me away. And who would ever think that, the Pantera guy would like the Smiths? Well, because there's an emotional connection. You've nailed it. I had to come around to something that I've made the joke that when I quit smoking, I lost my filter. That in some ways I have, come to, it's like, yeah, I don't give a fuck anymore. Like, there have been lots of things that I've kind of, that maybe I would have been a hang up for me before, that I now sort of realize, like, oh, I don't have time to worry about that. Again, maybe that's letting that baggage go. But I find that I dance a bit more. I would never have danced back in the day. But I went and saw a couple weeks ago, I saw an electronic artist that I like, DJ/musician.
Who?
He calls himself Prefuse 73.
Never heard
And
of
it's sort of, it's mostly instrumental hip hop. Some, it might call it like glitch hop, or
trap,
it's very, I don't think that term was coined yet.
Oh,
when
yeah.
when Prefuse 73 started. But I think instrumental hip hop is maybe the most accurate in a way.
Yeah, trip hop I think is one of the it's weird. What's your opinion? Well, I'll ask you afterwards, but don't let me forget.
Well,
all these subgenre titles. I'd like to know your opinion on that.
When I went to go see him, and there were two other DJs on the bill before him, and they, it was a nonstop evening. One DJ segued into the next. Like, the next dude came up on stage and joined him, and they kind of transitioned in and out. So the sounds never stopped. But just to have that time where I'm dancing and head bobbing and losing myself to instrumental music was a great feeling. And that's, again, not something that I probably would have done in the past. And in the past, it was probably harder to go to a lot of shows, which is one of the great things that I like about Portland, is that I can walk out my front door and walk and see, favorite bands and shows. Whereas in the past, when I went to college about an hour out of DC, which pretty much anybody that's on tour is going to play through DC. So they were only an hour away, but it still kind of required a little bit of a journey to get there. So I had to pick and choose the shows that I wanted to go see. Now it's a little easier to go, hell yeah, I'll go see Prefuse 73. I'll go walk to the club. So that, I like that. I love that feeling. I don't like it. I love it. It's a hugely important thing to me.
Well,
subgenres?
Yeah, because there's so many titles for them. Before I forget, there's a quote, because you remind me of it with what you said. I actually just heard it recently, and I'm probably gonna mess it up, but it's something along the lines that instrumental music is my thinking time, or something like that. It basically saying that when there's music with no vocals and just instrumental, it's when it's almost like we talked about before, like a time to reflect, a time to, instead of somebody else, because usually you're analyzing the lyrics and with their story, but when there's just instruments, you kind of get lost in the music, and you kind of, basically you become your own story.
I've heard the quote, and I'm not sure when and I'm not sure where. Instrumental music lets me hear myself think. And I think that's pretty much what you were just saying, is to not have someone's lyrics. And it took me a long time to get there. But definitely got there to the point where, no, I enjoy instrumental music. Yeah, it lets me hear myself think.
That I think that is the quote, and you just remembered it while I messed it up.
I don't know who said it or where I even picked it up. But yeah, that was the thing that, and that's what's great is the second I read that, it immediately rang true. And you feel that and you know what it means and you take it.
Before I let you go, there's one question I ask a lot of people that are in the mainstream or not the alternative media, and a lot of people who do documentaries, and people who are just really just I guess searchers for the truth, I guess truth seekers or whatnot. But at one time, I feel like everybody had that documentary or that book or that something that kind of I guess let them see behind the curtains a little bit. That kind of was the real big influence on them. Do you have something like that? Do you have something? What caused? Because I mean, obviously, I guess, and I always say this for lack of a better term, you're more aware or you're more awakened to, I guess, how things really work compared to an average person who only watches mainstream media. But what caused that? Was it a small thing that, small baby steps, or was there a moment in your life that you can look back and say, that's when I really noticed, like, holy shit, things aren't what they seem?
There's probably been a few of those kind of big or signpost kind of moments along the way. And I would say, a first kind of early one would absolutely be, if not necessarily Dead Kennedys music, it was the Jello Biafra. He was the lead singer of the Dead Kennedys, who, after the band broke up, he pretty much just ran the record label and started to do spoken word albums. So when I heard Jello Biafra's spoken word albums talking about why he was glad the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up, because he talked about their next mission was going to take up a bunch of plutonium, and what if that blew up over the Earth? Would have been a catastrophic disaster. To hear Jello Biafra talk about things that I would have never have known about, that really opened my eyes to a lot of things. Because again, I was still in the church, and to hear somebody talking about, atheism and sort of, anti-religion and bad religion, so to speak, Jello Biafra was a huge influence. And then, years later, post 9/11, I would say seeing, because honestly, and this is the story I always told, post 9/11, it was my own media interests that made me go, hey, what's the video of the plane hitting the Pentagon look like? I want to see what that looks like, and typed it in. And that was the thing that made me realize that they had never released that video and we had never seen it. And I was like, well, why? And that sent me down the 9/11 road. At which point, I saw the documentary about, well, maybe there was like a pod or, some kind of bombs placed under the plane. So when it hit the building, it blew up a bunch. And it's like, well, that's interesting. It doesn't really seem to totally ring true. But honestly, it was seeing Alex Jones's 9/11 Road to Tyranny.
That one gets brought up a lot, actually.
It had a broad overview of everything. So not only, it went through 9/11 and the whole first part of it, and then it went back and covered all the stuff that happened in the 90s. So, yeah, I think that was a hugely influential thing to see. And I think, regardless of what anybody, wants to say about, Alex Jones or InfoWars, he inspired a hell of a lot of people to do what you and I are doing right now. So I think folks like Alex Jones and folks like Jello Biafra, who's, a quote I pretty much close all my episodes with, I got from Jello Biafra: don't hate the media, become the media. Jello Biafra said that, and that's pretty much the same thing Jones has always said. It's like, I want to empower you to do your own thing. And then, I find, after years of, like I said, listening to, my favorite artists or, I love Morrissey. I love Orson Welles. I love Woody Allen films. Those all might be super nerdy things and we're on different levels of stuff. But I find those folks are, auteurs in a way. Like, those are the folks who, it's their work and they do their work on their terms. Woody Allen busts out a movie every year. Like, his actors have won more Oscars than any other director.
Yeah, that is true.
Like folks like Morrissey. He's bounced around on record labels, but he pretty much is what he is, does what he does, and says what he feels and sticks with that. And I think I admire that in artists that I like, and who knows, they might be crazy bastards in their private lives. But Lord knows artists sometimes have a tendency to be crazy. But I admire their work, that they stick to and put out there and stay true to it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And that quote is awesome. I think I might have heard you say it before, maybe on another interview or whatnot. But yeah, that is an awesome quote because it does remind you that instead of complaining about it, we can do something about it.
And that was the thing that maybe wasn't really, or at least graspable in a way to me as a kid, to be my own media, because what did that mean in 1991? I don't know how to be my own media, because I wasn't ready to start printing up zines or anything. And it's only now that we have the technology, like, that things have progressed to the point where I go, like I said earlier, now I have the ability to do those things that I've always loved. And now it's all there, and I can be my own media, and you can too.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. And anybody who's listening, I've said this before in like early episodes when we first started this podcast. If you have any type of motivation at all to chase something that you enjoy doing, do it. Start doing music, start doing paintings, start doing art, start doing whatever, and chase what you enjoy doing, because that's what life's about, is doing things you enjoy. And
Yep.
and it's so important to do that. I think so many of us get stuck in the grind of just trying to survive and keep our head above water and pay our bills, and then I know people who like doing woodwork or doing whatever. And I have a buddy who likes doing woodwork, who just recently I had a conversation with about, I'm like, why aren't you doing it, Kevin? I'm like, you should really. He's like, oh, I don't have time. And I'm like, no, you always make excuses for not having time. I'm like, do it. I'm like, you'll find some time, and I'll tell you, once you start, I'm like, you're gonna really be happy the fact that you start doing it again, And it's just, so it's no matter what age you are or how old you are. If you like doing comedy, if you like doing music, if you like doing whatever, then do it. Don't let the everyday grind. And I think it'll make life a little easier because you're doing something you enjoy. It'll probably help you do some meditating and whatnot. So I think all that stuff's really important. So,
Well, and I think that's been the growing process, because when we all got, into 9/11 truth in 2002 and 3, and for years after that, and that's the thing, and it still goes on. We all think, oh my God, holy shit, martial law's coming tomorrow, war by Monday, World War III. That kind of level of amped upness, you realize it's like, well, shit would have happened by now and it is a slow step. But I guess I've reached the point in a way where I feel like, well, if the world is all going to blow up, like I'd rather enjoy myself now, because whether or not nukes are going to start flying or if we're going to get killed by asteroids, it's like, yeah, I can't stop either of that shit.
yeah, no,
I think you reach a point where, well, what are we fighting for ultimately, of all of this, alternative media and truth movements and all that stuff? It's like, I'm not fighting to just yell and scream all the time and not be happy. I think that was the thing that quitting smoking, turning 35, that was the year and a half ago. I think it really made me, suddenly think, I realized I'm not getting any younger. And so you realize the things that are important and the things that aren't. And maybe that's been kind of the through line in a way of our conversation, is you realize you got to let some of the baggage go and live your life and be happy. So on that note, I'm actually going to head out to the local independent, and I guess it's the oldest record store in the Pacific Northwest is celebrating their 45th anniversary today.
awesome.
So, of course, are having a big party and sales and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go to Music Millennium and buy some records.
Nice. Well, thanks, James, for being with us. I really, really appreciate you taking time out of. I know it's a Saturday. I usually don't do a lot of podcasts on Saturday because I think people just have other shit they'd rather be doing. But thanks so much for being with us. Is there anything on Media Monarchy you got coming up? Obviously, you got the weekly show with James Corbett, New World next week, which they can find on your website, Media Monarchy, and also on James Corbett's website.
Yeah, and even use, and we've been trying to use it more, and I think it's kind of working successfully, to even just use hashtag New World Next Week on Twitter to submit story ideas. And the more we've started to do that, the more folks have been doing it. So then they get a mention on the show. Like, it's been a nice kind of reciprocal relationship because, of course, James and I can't think of all the news stories. There's always great news tips from folks out there. I would also, I would point folks to, I've been doing it for 2 years now, and it was basically when I went, because I basically worked part-time at a grocery store and did Media Monarchy part-time. I got a full-time radio job, which pretty much meant I had to put a lot of my Media Monarchy work on the back burner. So I stopped doing the weekly big podcast that I was kind of known for. And now I mainly do the New World Next Week with James, but I also self-produce a weekly new music podcast that has a lot of indie rock, instrumental stuff, folk, hip-hop, world music. Like, it's basically brand new music. And I think if you look at it, you look down the list of bands each week and go, oh yeah, I think I've heard something about that. I basically say, if you feel like, oh, there's never any new music, or how do you find new music? It's like, I do it for you. Check out Pump Up the Volume. It's our podcast each week of some of the hottest, coolest new music around, most of it all independent that you'd want to support and be excited about. I've also been trying to do new interviews as well. Again, a lot of what I do is just trying to keep up with James Corbett. And, his output is amazing. And I, am thankful to have hooked up with him and to be able to do as much work with him as I can. I'm constantly just trying to keep up with him. I've started a sort of irregularly scheduled interview show called Geopolitics, where I'm trying to interview folks around the world about world issues. Because we're all, a lot of it is, like a lot of this, it's for my own education. Because there are definitely times I look at myself, and Cassie and I like, oh, we're stupid Americans and don't know our geography as good as we should. Having guests on to talk about kind of world issues. So I talked to Michael Vale, who runs Strat Risks, and we talked about Ukraine and the TPP. I talked to Eva Bartlett, who is an activist in Gaza. And coming up in just a couple of days, I'm going to talk to Niall Bowie, who's actually based in Malaysia. So we're going to talk about the crazy missing plane, as well Malaysian politics, and of course how it relates to to the wider Asian world and China and Japan and Thailand and all of that. So I've been doing a geopolitics show. I've even started getting more into women's issues. I've been using hashtag media matriarchy to cover women's issues, women in the media, in politics and such. So again, it's all those kind of areas that I'm interested in that I just sort of make a platform for. And what you were just saying, if there's something you feel like you should be doing, do it. Like, stop procrastinating. I think this is a mangled Hemingway quote, but the shortest answer is doing the thing.
Yeah, and there's if anybody has a hard time fighting that resistance, there's a great book called The War of Art, and it's all about fighting resistance and trying to find motivation to do the things you enjoy. And you know what, we're both perfect examples of this. Like, both of our projects, or well, my project and all your projects are we're all a idea at one time that started off as an idea. You went through with it, and regardless of the success that I ever have on this podcast, it's not, I enjoy doing this. I get to meet cool people like you. I get to, I've talked to a bunch of other really interesting people. I've learned a lot from every one of these shows. And at the end of the day, to me, that makes it worthwhile. And I'm enjoying it. So, don't look at it as, well, if I can't get anywhere, if I'm not going to, get any attention or whatever, do it for the right reasons. And then hopefully this success comes along with it later, and usually those are people who succeed anyways. The people who do it because they love it and not because they're trying to, get attention or whatnot.
Which can even relate right back to, it has that passion, it has that emotion, and it has that connection that you can connect with because, it wasn't made in a corporate boardroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks, James. Get to that party, and I don't want to hold you up too much longer. And thanks again, James. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll have you on in the future. Oh, that interview show you do, is that going to be on Media Monarchy also?
That's the main thing. So even though all the different shows that I do and all the different projects and ideas, everything, even though they all may have their own separate websites, it all will still live under the MediaMonarchy.com banner. So whether it's a geopolitics interview or a Pump Up the Volume mixtape, it'll all be on MediaMonarchy.com.
Uh,
Thanks so much, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, me too, man. I had a blast because it's not too often I get to talk to. It's funny when I first started this podcast, I'm like, I hope I get somebody from alternative media or a filmmaker I like. But I'm like, it'll probably be easier to get some, some smaller musicians and stuff I like, so I can talk about music and stuff. And I'm like, it was so hard to get musicians on. I've actually had more luck with people, like yourself and James Corbett and Dan Carlin and Lee Camp and people who are passionate about the alternate history and current events. And I don't know if maybe just like the young crowd emails musicians so much that it's hard for them to kind of filter through it and find some little podcast that wants them to be on. But
There's probably some of that, and also probably if they're, if they're a, working band, they're
yeah,
probably they're asleep right now.
yeah. And talking about music and alternative media, two bands from the UK that if people are looking for new music that are very politically and social issue driven, Enter Shikari and The Architects, both from the UK. Awesome bands. I've seen them both live a bunch of times. They both working on a new album. One of them I think already has a new album out. There's not too many political bands anymore. Any political music you want to throw out there that that's new that you think people might if they're into music and current events and alternative news?
And that's where, in a way, I
kind of put you on the spot. My bad.
I'm like, it's hard sometimes. And I mean, like I said, I've heaped praise on the Dead Kennedys, but it's so on the nose. Like it's so descriptive about politics and social issues that sometimes it's not necessarily fun to always listen to. That I think that can be a hard, balance, because you don't want to feel like you're being lectured to with something very, trying to teach you something, is when it's more kind of a part of the music itself. But having said that, one band I've been digging lately is called, appropriately enough, maybe you're not, Future of the Left are kind of a heavy band.
I'll have to check them out.
They have songs like How to Talk to a Friendly Policeman. But again, it's like when you listen to the lyrics, it's not necessarily over the top on the nose political thought, but it's definitely socially agitating kind of music. Yeah, Future of the Left. That's what I'm digging right now. But there's a million bands that I listen to all the time. I mentioned Cursive when you rang me, and it was DJ Shadow. So that's more kind of instrumental hip hop. So not very political, but you can kind of, the ideas are all still in there. Because again, it's made by people with passion.
Yeah, and I think that's what's important. I mean, it's listen to something that moves you, that you feel something that affects you emotionally in one way or another. And I guess regardless if it has a political or not, meaning to it, then it's still good. I think the most important, and you're right. Things can be very lectury and I might have made up that word, but it might feel like a lecture if in certain music. I grew up when the metalcore scene got popular. I listened to some metalcore bands that are Christian metal, and they weren't like all out like praising Jesus and whatnot, so I could listen to it. It wasn't that bad. And people are like, how do you listen to Christian metal? You're an atheist. I'm like, because it's not preachery, but I'm like, if a political band was, like you said, also saying, we hate the right or we hate the left, and it was so like not creative at all, and it was just like them preaching, then I probably wouldn't enjoy that either, or even if I agreed with it, so
I love MXPX. There's sometimes a guilty pleasure because it just sounds kind of like standard pop punk, but they were a Christian punk band. There's Tooth and Nail. Surely that label probably still exists. It was like a Christian punk label, but most of the bands, again, on there weren't singing, Jesus Loves Me. You would only really know it if you knew it, or if you were looking at the liner notes and you'd see, there would probably be a little bit bigger of like, all thanks and praise go to God. Like better than your average, like, yeah, thanks to God and mommy and stuff,
Yeah.
One last thing, and it's funny because we'll mention metalcore and then I'll mention Depeche Mode.
Oh, I love Depeche Mode.
It's the only thing of theirs I have on vinyl, and I got it, for like a couple bucks. That I don't even remember where or how I kind of ended up with it. But their album, Some Great Reward, has two of their biggest hits. It's got Master and Servant, but it also has People Are People, which folks probably know because that gets played on there. People are people, so why should it be? You and I should get along so awfully. I was reading about it and reading about the album because, again, when I'm getting into something, I want to get into it. And so I'm reading about it and learning the recording and the history and the tour after it and all that stuff. They haven't played People Are People live since 1988. And the
Wow.
band basically hates the song because even the writers are quoted as saying, yeah, it's just so on the nose. Like the rest of the album sort of describes characters and story and nuance. And People Are People says, let's not be racist. Like and basically you're like, yeah, it's just artistically, it's not very good. And they don't play it.
Well,
So that's interesting.
they got really dark after that was their early stuff. Master and Servant and People Are People were they're really like poppy electro music stuff. But they got people don't realize when the singer went through like in rehab and all. I mean, they came out with some.
He's tried to kill himself multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, their stuff got really dark, and even "Enjoy the Silence" is another really popular song from them, and they have tons. I mean, it's amazing. It's weird because that's the one artist when I remember growing up, and I don't even know how I got into them, and I think I can't remember, but so many other artists that I liked end up being on their tribute album, and I'm like, wait, so it's not weird because all these other people who like other genres of music, because I don't mind. Two genres I love is electronic music, and I love like metal and I guess rock, if that's even a such thing anymore. But in other words, metal that's not necessarily that heavy, but still I guess in the metal genre. But and it was weird how many people in the metal genre liked Depeche Mode. I mean, Deftones was on their tribute album. Monster Magnet, Rammstein. Well, Rammstein kind of makes sense, but Smashing Pumpkins, like a lot of other artists that you're like, wait, you like this electro synth pop band from the '80s? It's weird how certain bands influenced a lot of other artists who we talked about earlier who aren't even necessarily in that genre of music. So, yeah, so that's pretty cool. But
it comes back to the passion.
Yeah, it is, and I think they captured that, especially as the music got darker. I mean, he had some what was it, Alone in My Room or something like that, Barrel of a Gun. He had a couple of songs that were just so dark, and you really knew that it was coming from a dark place, and it was just it was amazing because I think that's what when we feel human, when we feel something, and I think that's why some people like. They like music, even if it's sad music, even if it's old Johnny Cash or whatever, it's stuff that, was this band Commie Christ. I know I'm holding you up, but real quick, Joe, Commie Christ is another electronic band that's really good, industrial electronic band. And he has do you know Commie Christ?
I know the name. I don't think I've ever heard of him.
Yeah, he's really dark on stage and has this like alter ego basically that he becomes on stage, and the music's really dark and this and that, and says some things that really isn't politically correct at all, and people are like, how do you what do you get out of this? And he's like, when I was sad growing up, he's like, I didn't want to listen to something that was happy, and he's like, I wanted to listen to something that kind of related to how I felt, and he's like, so I put on Johnny Cash and listen to something dark or whatnot. So I think some people who don't listen to some sad music and don't understand what people get out of it, but I think there's something about finding something that relates to you. It's like, oh shit, this dude's going through the same thing I'm going through, and I think that's what we get out of it.
Yeah, because I mean, you feel like happy music again, it's sometimes like it maybe doesn't feel as real, and that might not be fair, and that might not be the complete reality, but it seems like more relatable, emotionally connected art comes from places of hurt or pain or trying to work through things, not from the woohoo, let's party all night.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. Well, for the 8th time, we're gonna sign out. Thanks, James. I really appreciate it. I haven't got to talk about music with a guest in a while, so this is really fun, and hopefully we have you on again in the future.
Please.
Yeah, definitely. I would really enjoy, and hopefully we'll get my my co-host here. He's like probably the biggest Pearl Jam fan you'll ever meet in your life, and he travels all over, northern, maybe even Southern America too, to go see him and stuff like that. He's a huge music fan too, so it'll be cool to kind of, all kind of share some stories and stuff like that. So thanks again, James. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and we'll keep in touch. I'll be looking forward to checking out your website and all those other very not so complicated tabs. You know, it seems like you broke it down pretty easily. Like you said, it can be a little intimidating because you're not sure what each one does. You know, but you know, I think you broke it down. So basically, what you're saying is, if you want to see any work done by James Evan Pilato, go to Media Monarchy, and it'll be there, and check it out and stuff. And well, of course, we'll be looking forward to that New World next week. I think you just released a recent one a day or two ago, right? A Thursday, maybe Friday.
Yeah, they should generally always get published on Thursday. We shoot them late to me Wednesday night, which of course is then Thursday afternoon to James in Japan. But yeah, they pretty much always get published here, here in the Western world by Thursday afternoon.
Yeah. So definitely check that out. In like 15 minutes, they basically hit on, the current events of that week, all the biggest stories, and both James and James give you great, research and opinions on what's going on. So definitely check that out. Thanks again, James. Enjoy the rest of your day, and keep in touch.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
See ya.